Many people consider 1965 to be the golden year of the single. And 2025 marks the 60th anniversary of this pivotal year in the history of popular music. This is the first episode of a new series that will take a monthly look at the singles of 1965. So, without further ado, here are some cool British singles released in January. Let's begin. January 1965 saw the release of the debut single by The Who. The record was produced by American producer Shel Talmy. At that point in early 1965, Talmy had already produced a couple of hits for groups such as the Kinks, and he was well known for his innovative production techniques and studio tricks. In an interview several years later, Shel Talmy recalled,
"I chose I Can't Explain for the first session I produced for The Who, and having used Pi No. 2 Studio for most of the Kinks tracks, I decided to stay with it for the initial Who recording. The Who have acknowledged they were inspired and absorbed influences from the Kinks, and that Pete Townshend deliberately set out to write a song containing Kinks elements that would get my attention. I'd already concluded how good I thought Pete Townshend's guitar playing was, but this was a first session and wanted to ensure that everything went smoothly, so I booked Jimmy Page to be there. But he wasn't needed, as Pete was brilliant."
The B-side was a cover of a traditional blues song called Bald-Headed Woman. The New Musical Express wrote,
"Here's a group I like immensely, and their absorbing sound matches their gimmick name, The Who. They were originally the High Numbers. I Can't Explain is a pounding shuffle shaker with surf-like counter-harmonies behind the main lyric. It's insidious and insistent, with an arresting backing, a sort of blend of Mersey beat and surfing. Keep your eye on this one."
The single reached number 8 and remained in the British charts for 13 weeks. In the States, the single stalled at number 93 according to Billboard.
So tired of waiting, tired of waiting for you.
January 1965 also saw the release of this great single by the Kinks. The single wasn't as wild as their two previous 45s, but the song became a massive hit and it's still one of the Kinks' most beloved classics. Record Mirror wrote,
"Slower effort here from the Kinks, but the all-day and all of the night beat can still be detected pretty easily in the background. A moody and rather atmospheric song that's well performed and has its highlights. Not as strong though as their last two, but it should make the charts, perhaps just in the top 10.
The single became a big hit, reaching number 1 in Britain and number 6 in the States. And the song also became a big hit in several European countries.
You said you loved me all the while. You said our love would always be in style.
Another highlight from January 1965 was this great song by the Primitives. This was a truly wild and anarchic rhythm and blues number, with the sort of sound that nowadays would be labeled as proto-punk.
Well, you drive me crazy. Well, I love you, baby, but you ain't no use to me.
The song has appeared on multiple garage rock compilations such as the Second Nuggets box set. The New Musical Express wrote,
The Primitives offer a shot of earthy rhythm and blues, wild and frantic, with tambourine and harmonica, a solo voice showcase. It's in the Kinks idiom. The Flip, a song called How Do You Feel, is a hectic tear-up unison vocal.
The single didn't chart, and just like many bands from that era, the group eventually moved to another country in order to avoid the competition that existed in Britain. The Primitives moved to Italy, and they enjoyed great success there in 1966 and 1967. The group broke up in the late 60s, but lead singer Mal Ryder launched a solo career in Italy and enjoyed great success there in the 70s and early 80s, scoring several hits and selling millions of records. In 1989, the singer became a naturalized Italian citizen. Another highlight from January was this B-side by the Syndicats. The single was produced by genius British producer Joe Meek, and the group featured future Yes member Steve Howe on guitar. It wouldn't be strange to mistake this B-side for a new wave recording from the late 70s or early 80s. The keyboards and the unusual drum sound make this track sound like the sort of stuff that bands like the B-52s or Devo would record later in the early 80s. The A-side was a wild cover of Howling for You, a song that was originally written by Howlin' Wolf and Willie Dixon. The New Musical Express wrote,
The Syndicats bound along at a terrifying pace in Willie Dixon's fast-moving hand clapper Howling for My Baby, semi-spoken vocal, rumbling rhythm, tinkling piano, and twangs galore. A wild one, this. The B-side is a group composition that's equally as dynamic, with organ to the fore.
The single got a fair amount of promotion, and the group even appeared on a television show called The Beat Room performing the song.
And this week from London we present the Syndicats.
But unfortunately, the single went over the heads of the record-buying public, and it didn't manage to make the charts. January 1965 also saw the release of this excellent single by The Animals. The song was originally written for Nina Simone, who recorded the first version in 1964. This cover by The Animals was recorded in November 1964 and produced by Mickey Most. The New Musical Express wrote,
A soulful heart cry from Eric Burdon, who sings the plaintive lyric of Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood in clipped, beseeching phrases with humming support from the other boys. That's the latest from The Animals, and again, it's something out of the usual run of pop discs. Basically, the rhythm is mid-tempo, but, as on all this group's records, the backing is outstanding, with an attractive guitar figure, compelling organ and pounding drums. Yes, another big one for them.
The B-side was an upbeat bluesy number written by Eric Burdon and Alan Price.
There ain't no place like the club of go-go.
The single became a big international smash, reaching number 3 in Britain and number 15 in the States, and also becoming a top 10 hit in several European countries.
You got a frantic little walk, a kind of lazy little toe.
This single by The Sorrows, which was their debut 45, is yet another highlight from January 1965. The A-side had a truly wild and frantic sound. And the band's music seemed to merge influences from groups such as the Stones and the Kinks. The chorus was obviously very influenced by Ray Davies and company.
Don't wanna be free, don't wanna be free, don't wanna be free, oh now.
Record Mirror wrote,
Send the Sorrows to Coventry, and they won't mind at all. It's actually their hometown. And incidentally, the five lads have nothing to be sorrowful about following their debut disc. Big sound and big beat. The quintet have been together only since March 1964, but they were individually with other groups earlier. Lead singer Don Farden says he'd like to own a 36-bedroomed house with a swimming pool. Agent Drew Harvey really hauled them out of a bad spot in their career. He sent them to Germany for a month and then got them a contract with Pi Records on their return. They swing. Nothing sad about the Sorrows.
The B-side was another good song called Come With Me.
You're the one I wanna hear you say now. Oh yeah, you're the girl that I've been waiting for now.
Just like the Primitives, the Sorrows relocated to Italy in 1966 in order to avoid the competition that existed in Britain. The group achieved moderate success in Italy throughout 1966 and 1967, and they finally decided to split up in 1969.
The purpose of a man is to love a woman, and the purpose of a woman is to love a man. So come on, baby, let's start today. Come on, baby, let's play the game of love, love, la 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 la.
This single by the Mindbenders became one of the biggest British hits of January 1965. This was the group's fifth single, and their most successful 45 with Wayne Fontana on vocals. The New Musical Express wrote,
A walloping drum solo opening is soon enlarged by twangy guitar and tambourine. Then in comes Wayne Fontana in dual track, with the Mindbenders harmonizing effectively in the game of love, and a gimmick deep voice treatment of the word love. It should do very well. and it deserves to.
The single became a huge hit. The Game of Love reached number 2 in the UK and number 1 in the States.
Tell her no, 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 no.
January 1965 also saw the release of the Zombies' third single. The group's first 45 became a massive success, reaching number 12 in Britain and number 2 in the States. Tell Her No was another excellent song written by keyboardist Rod Argent. The New Musical Express wrote,
Like the Wayne Fontana crew, the Zombies have the happy knack of combining melody and beat, and this policy is maintained in Tell Her No. It's a broken beat medium shaker, highlighted by crashing cymbals, piano, and castanets. The tune didn't hit me at first, but it's grown on me.
Despite the success of their debut single, the record only managed to reach number 42 in Britain. In the States, however, the single became a big hit, reaching number 6 and remaining in the top 40 for several weeks.
And now we have a completely different sound. That is the 5 young gentlemen who are making such an impact on the hit parade currently, the Rolling Stones!
By January 1965, the music scene in Britain was definitely changing. The British rhythm and blues boom, which was spearheaded by groups such as the Rolling Stones and the Yardbirds, had taken the music scene by storm, and the club scene in Britain was filled with bands who were going for this raw and aggressive rhythm and blues sound. As a result of this, the Merseybeat bands who had dominated the charts in 1963 and 1964 were starting to lose popularity, and their music was starting to be seen as bland and corny. January 1965 saw the release of several singles by groups who were going for this type of raw and unpolished rhythm and blues sound. Apart from the previously mentioned singles by groups such as the Sorrows and the Primitives, January 1965 also saw the release of singles by other rhythm and blues groups such as 4+1, the Pickwicks, the Falling Leaves, and the Mule Skinners.
There's two kinds of people that I just can't stand. That's a lying woman and a cheating man. Don't lie to me.
This B-side by a group called 4+1 was an excellent cover of Don't Lie to Me by Chuck Berry. The group featured Keith West on lead vocals and Junior Wood on guitar. Later in 1965, future Yes member Steve Howe joined the band, and the group changed its name to The In Crowd, who released a couple of really killer singles in late 1965. Later in late 1966, the group started to embrace psychedelia and they changed their name to Tomorrow.
I need your loving, baby. Honey, don't you see? That's right.
Another rhythm and blues single from January 1965 was this single by the Mule Skinners. The A-side was a group composition called Need Your Loving. The B-side was a cover of this classic by Howling Wolf.
I am Lord, the backbone man.
A couple of years later in 1967, the song was also famously covered by The Doors. The Mule Skinners featured future Small Faces keyboardist Ian McLagan, but at the time, McLagan was playing rhythm guitar instead of keyboard. The single got mostly positive reviews in the press, but it didn't manage to make the charts.
'Cause she loves to be loved. She loves to be loved. She loves to be loved wherever she goes. Oh!
Another cool rhythm and blues single from January is this one by a group called the Falling Leaves. The New Musical Express wrote,
The Falling Leaves create an effectively contrived rhythm and blues sound in She Loves to Be Loved, with swinging bluesy organ, maracas, harmonica, insidious toe-tapping rhythm, and solo voice. None too melodic, though.
and another rhythm and blues single that's worth mentioning is this 45 by the Pickwicks.
Come on in, girl. Ooh, a little by little. I said little by little.
This was the group's third single, and their first with Warner Brothers. The group adopted a Victorian image as a gimmick, but the novelty soon wore off, and by the time this single was released, the Pickwick Papers image had already been dropped. The New Musical Express wrote,
A British group on the Warner Brothers label. That's the Pickwicks with Little by Little, a hectic 12-bar shaker in the Stones tradition. It sets a hectic pace with a pounding rhythm. It has an exceptionally happy feel, and though it may not possess any great individuality, Its value for money for the flip is just as good.
The Flip was this Ray Davies composition which had already been released as the B-side of the Kinks' debut single. All these rhythm and blues groups enjoyed great popularity in clubs all over Britain, but none of these singles managed to make a dent in the charts.
I won't look twice when the other girls go by.
This single by the Hollies was the group's 845. The song, which was written by Jerry Goffin and Russ Titelman, became the Hollies' fifth top 10 hit. Record Mirror wrote,
Here's a commendable blend of shakebeat and tuneful melody from the Hollies with their parlophone latest, Yes I Will. Storming pace and ear-catching harmonies highlight the mid-tempo tune. This one has the magic touch and should do pretty well.
The single reached number 9 in Britain, but it failed to chart in the States, where it was released a couple of months later on the Imperial label.
Well, I'll make it alright. Well, I'll make it alright. From Monday morning to Friday night.
Another highlight from January 1965 was this great B-side by Mike Sheridan and the Night Riders. The Night Riders were one of the most popular Birmingham groups from that period. But the popularity in their native Birmingham wasn't enough to grant them a hit on the British charts. The group featured Roy Wood on guitar, who would later achieve great success as the founding member and leader of the Mood. This was the group's fourth single, and the highlight was clearly the B-side, a great song with a sound that was reminiscent of Johnny Kidd and the Pirates. The song achieved great success in Birmingham, but as previously stated, it failed to enter the national charts.
It's not unusual to be loved by anyone.
Of course, a video about January 1965 wouldn't be complete without mentioning one of the biggest British hits from January. The song, which was written by Les Reed and Gordon Mills, was originally written for Sandy Shaw. Tom Jones, who was virtually unknown at the time, was asked to record a demo of the song. But when Sandy Shaw heard it, she was so impressed with his delivery that she recommended he sing it instead. Over the years, many people have cited Jimmy Page as the session guitarist who played on the song. And Jimmy Page himself lists the session in his online discography. But according to composer and arranger Les Reed, the session guitarist who played on the track was Joe Moretti, who also played on huge British classics such as Brand New Cadillac by Vince Taylor and Shaking All Over by Johnny Kidd. The single became Tom Jones' first success, and still remains one of the biggest hits he ever recorded. When the single was originally released, however, the press didn't believe in its chart possibilities. Record Mirror wrote,
A vibrant and vital treatment of the snappy bossa nova It's Not Unusual by Decca's Tom Jones, with a big band backing. It's quite a catchy tune, and Tom projects forcefully with a degree of belting. I'm told he's an exciting personality artist on stage, and some of this comes across on disc, though I don't envisage this as chart material.
The single became a massive international hit, reaching number 1 in Britain and number 3 in the States.
Begins to crumble, but love will never die, because we'll see about to tumble before we say goodbye, my love and I.
And another huge hit from January 1965 was this single by Unit 4+2. Record Mirror wrote,
A surprise tip for the charts? Sure, but this first-rate song is given a musicianly treatment by a highly talented outfit. The idea behind the number is good and commercial. Needs a couple of spins to establish, but that shouldn't hold it back. The boys have a folksy and occasionally Latin-tinged setup going, and the sounds are very good indeed. Watch this one. Remember we told you.
In a Melody Maker interview later that year, the Byrds cited this song as one of their favorite tracks of 1965, and they told the press that this song was a huge influence on the way they approached harmonies. Concrete and Clay became a huge hit, reaching number 1 in Britain and remaining in the charts for several weeks. In the States, the single reached number 18 according to Billboard. I hope you enjoyed this trip to January 1965. See you next time.